They laughed the moment she walked into the hangar. An elderly woman in a faded, torn jacket that looked like it belonged to another lifetime. The young cadets whispered loudly enough for her to hear, mocking the frayed patch on her shoulder, calling it ancient history. But the laughter died the second a four-star general stepped inside, caught one glimpse of that same old patch, and suddenly froze mid-stride. The color drained from his face. His voice cracked, because that patch wasn't just fabric, it was a ghost, a legend. A name the military hadn't spoken in 17 long years, and now, standing in front of him, was the woman everyone thought had disappeared forever. The morning sun filtered through the dusty windows of Falcon Air Base, casting long golden stripes across the hangar floor. The cadets were busy performing inspections, polishing tools, and joking around with the kind of confidence only youth can afford. Then the hangar door rolled open, screeching like a memory trying to force its way back into the world, and she walked in. Thin, quiet, carrying nothing but the weight of a history no one recognized. Her jacket hung loosely from her shoulders, the fabric faded, but the patch still stitched firmly in place. A wolf's head inside a thunderbolt, the symbol of a unit they had only heard whispers of. At first, the cadets didn't know what to make of her. She looked like she could have been someone's grandmother. She moved slowly, running her fingers along old aircraft frames. Not with curiosity, but with familiarity, as if each bolt carried a secret she once knew by heart. One cadet nudged another and smirked. Soon the whispers grew into snickers. Who is this old lady? Why is she wearing a military jacket? Why does she walk like she belongs here? They joked about her outdated gear, her wrinkled hands, and her small stature. But she didn't respond. She just kept moving, touching the cold metal of the planes like she was greeting old friends she never expected to see again. A young pilot trainee named Harris stepped forward, unable to resist the urge to show off in front of his friends. He pointed to the patch with a sarcastic grin and said, "Nice jacket, ma'am. Did you get it from a thrift shop?" The others laughed. She lifted her gaze for the first time, meeting Harris's eyes with a calm, tired expression. There was no anger in her look, only sadness, the kind that comes from having lived through things nobody in that room could imagine. Harris laughed again, but this time his voice didn't sound quite as confident. As she walked past them, the hangar fell strangely quiet. Something about her presence, something unspoken, made even the arrogant ones hesitate. She moved toward the back of the hangar where an old, grounded fighter jet stood, covered in dust. The moment her hand touched its wing, her posture straightened, her breathing steadied, and her eyes softened. For the first time, she allowed herself a small, bittersweet smile. She whispered something under her breath, and though no one could hear it clearly, it sounded like the name of someone she once lost. Then the sound of boots echoed across the hangar. A general entered, General Marcus Hayes, known for being stern, unshackable, and impossibly hard to impress. The cadets immediately snapped to attention. But Hayes didn't look at them. His eyes locked on the old woman by the jet. His steps slowed. His expression shifted from authority to something close to fear. One cadet cleared his throat to explain the situation, but Hayes silenced him with a raised hand. The general approached her carefully, almost reverently. When he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "Major Evelyn Grant, is that really you?" Every cadet stared in disbelief. The name hit them like a thunderclap. Evelyn Grant, a legend who vanished after a classified mission that had changed the tide of a war. A pilot no one had ever matched. A hero whose story had faded into rumor over the years. They had mocked her jacket. They had mocked her patch. And now the general himself stood frozen in front of her, unable to believe what he was seeing. Evelyn looked up, her eyes welling with memories rather than tears. "I was wondering how long it would take for someone to notice," she said softly. And the hangar fell silent again. This time not with mockery, but all the cadets gathered around, suddenly unsure whether to apologize or to simply disappear. General Hayes, however, stepped closer, studying the patch with trembling fingers. "I haven't seen that insignia since the Nightfall operation," he whispered. "They said your entire unit was gone." Evelyn gave a tired nod. "Most were. I wasn't supposed to make it either. But somebody had to finish what we started." Her voice cracked on the last word, and for the first time the cadets saw something beyond the quiet old woman. They saw the weight of sacrifice, the burden of survival, and the loneliness that comes from being the last remaining echo of a vanished unit. General Hayes guided her to a chair, insisting she sit, but Evelyn shook her head. "I'm not here to rest," she said. "I'm here because I heard you pulled the old Viper 7 projects out of storage." The general blinked in surprise. "How do you know about that?" She placed a hand on the dusty fighter jet behind her. "Because this one was mine." The gasps spread through the hangar. The cadets looked at the jet, at its vents, its scarred frame, its weathered control panel, and suddenly it wasn't just an old relic. It was a survivor, just like her. Evelyn stepped toward the cockpit, her hand trembling slightly as she lifted herself up. "They told people I died," she said softly. "And maybe a part of me did. But when the world moves on from people like us, sometimes we come back to remind them why we mattered." General Hayes lowered his head. "Why now?" "Because your new pilots need to understand what this patch really means," she replied. "Not glory, not heroism. Responsibility. Every stitch in this jacket is a life I carry with me. And if they're going to wear uniforms with pride, they need to know the cost." The cadets stood quietly, their earlier arrogance replaced by genuine respect. Harris stepped forward, his face pale with shame. "Mom, I didn't know." "If I had—" Evelyn cut him off gently. "It's not about what you knew. It's about what you choose to learn now." Then, with surprising strength, she climbed into the cockpit. The entire hangar held its breath. She placed her hands on the controls, her fingers settling into the grooves like they were molded for her alone. The general watched, knowing exactly what she was about to do. "Evelyn," he warned, "that aircraft hasn't been powered in years." She smiled faintly. "It remembers me?" And when she flipped the switch, the hangar lights flickered, the engines coughed, and then, after 17 years of silence, the fighter roared back to life like a beast awakened from a long sleep. Cadets stumbled backward in shock. General Hayes wiped a tear he didn't bother to hide, and Evelyn sat in the cockpit, the glow of the dashboard illuminating her tired eyes, looking not like an old woman, but like the legend she had always been. She powered down the engine slowly and climbed out. "Now," she said firmly, stepping onto the hangar floor, "let's teach your cadets what real discipline looks like." The general nodded, still overwhelmed. The cadets stood at attention, not out of fear, but respect. Evelyn Grant had returned not for glory, not for recognition, but to remind the next generation that the greatest heroes are often the ones who carry their past quietly, until the world needs them again. And as she walked away from the jet, her old jacket swaying with each step, no one saw a relic anymore. Only a living legend whose story had just begun again.